Hello, welcome to Here Comes the Bride, The Church Begins, devotional number 57 for our study through the book of Acts. We are in Acts chapter 23. We're going to pick up in verse 6, Acts 23:6. Hello, I am Jim Devore, the pastor of Cornerstone Church of Littlerock in Southern California. So glad to have you with us. We are working with Paul. He is at the end of his third missionary journey. He's in Jerusalem, and he's been grabbed by the Jews, rescued by the Jewish commander of 1,000 men, the military commander, but he still had to be put in jail until he could find out exactly what the crime was the Jews thought they had against Paul. And so now the commander, the tribune, has invited the Jewish leaders to come to the place of his bidding, and so that he could watch them interact with Paul and find out if they actually have a case against him. So we're going to pick it up in verse 6, where Paul actually begins his defense, so to speak, and the tribune now is going to get to watch the two parties, the Jewish ruling council, the Sanhedrin, and as they try to find a reason to have Paul arrested, jailed, beaten, killed. And Paul's going to begin by giving a defense of himself in verse 6. Now, when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, so the ruling crowd, the Sanhedrin, is made up of the two main parties of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Sadducees did not believe in a resurrection. The Pharisees did believe in a resurrection, okay? All right. And often they were against each other in theological manners. So what Paul's going to do here is he's going to use that approach to kind of work in his favor. He's actually going to get them upset so they're not thinking rationally, so they're not working together, so that the tribune can see that these guys are, that they're not coming from the right standing anyway. So here we go. Now, when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisee." So he's gathering the Pharisees to his side. They're going to defend their own, okay? "It is with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I am in trial." And when he said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit. But the Pharisees acknowledge them all. So let's just take a look at this real quick so we can see how Paul's statement is going to divide the room. If he says, it is with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I'm on trial. If you're a Pharisee and like, yes, preach it, Paul, you're with us, we agree with you. There is hope for resurrection. The Sadducees are going to rise up and say, wait a minute, there is no resurrection immediately. We can't trust this guy. He's speaking of something that isn't even true. Okay? And it's kind of one of those, stand for your own, so stand up for your brothers. And so you can almost picture them kind of going, hoorah, and yeah, whenever their point is said. And when the enemy's point is said, they're negative and booing. So Paul's using this as a way to get the sides literally to see their own division between each other, okay? Verse 9, "Then a great clamor arose, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees party stood and contended sharply. We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him?" Paul has said he's probably said about 30 seconds worth of material here. And he's been slapped once. That was in the beginning of chapter 23, okay? And now he's already divided the group, and half the group's already saying an angel must have spoke to him. If he's talking about resurrection stuff and these other things, an angel must have spoke to him, okay? All right. And so they've got dissension, we've got this frustration, but the Pharisees find nothing wrong with him. Verse 10, "And when the dissension became violent, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from among them by force and bring him into the barracks." So you can picture this taking place in some area where the tribune and his force and his military men, his soldiers, are up and guarding the entrances and exits so Paul can't escape, okay? Watching the situation going on down below, it appears, some type of below. Maybe they're in an amphitheater and they're up high. They see that immediately, 3-4 sentences into the statement, the Jews are back to hollering and screaming and revolting and creating such a clamor that the tribune is afraid that once again, without having operated an official case, that Paul is going to be arrested. So the tribune is showing an honest concern for Paul and a concern for the proper use and bringing about of justice. So look what happens here. And when the dissension became violent, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, that's violent. I mean, they must be pushing and pulling and screaming at him, throwing their hands up, advancing at him, physically dealing with him, to the point that the tribune's afraid he's going to be torn to pieces. They're being so rough with him. He commands the soldiers to go down, take him away from among them by force, and bring him into the barracks, where he can be safely watched and cared for. And apparently this attempt to have a civil trial is not going to work. So the tribune's going to have to come up with something else, okay? All right. Look at verse 11. The following night, okay, so we are in, I believe, day number 2, okay, because we've had one night. We go all the way back to verse 30 of chapter 22, after the original arrest, the mob scene, the danger to Paul, the tribune coming in and rescuing Paul out. We get to the end of 22, verse 30, but the next day, so this is the next day, that he brings the Sanhedrin, the Jewish leaders, in to have what he hopes is a civil presentation, almost like a trial, but not official. It's almost like a pre-hearing while the tribune makes up his mind what to do. That goes from not being hardly civil ever, even at the beginning, to immediate return to clamor and upset and mob response again. So he has to rescue Paul again, okay? So he rescues him again, brings him into the barracks. So we're at about 36 hours from the original incident, okay, into the next day. Okay, verse 11. The following night, so you got to add another 24 hours later. So we're like into day 3 here of this event. The following night, the Lord stood by him and said, "Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." Okay? So, again, here's the crux of it, okay? The crux of it is not so much that the Jews are going to rise up and try to kill him, okay? The crux of it is really even not that the Jews aren't willing to hold a civil trial. The crux of it is that Paul's life is in danger, and it's in danger by his own fellow countrymen, and he's doing what God's called him to do. He's going to testify about Jesus, but he's got this mob rule. So the issue for Paul is, my issue right now may not be that I'm going to be arrested by the Romans or jailed by the Romans. My problem is every time I'm with my own people, they want to kill me. And they're even in an attempt to be civil, they turn into mob rule. So everywhere Paul's turning, he's facing death. And he's facing death in a violent manner by the hand of angry men. So the night after the second rescue, you can imagine that Paul's like, I want to speak to my countrymen, I want to reach my countrymen, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. So the following night, the Lord stood by him and said, "Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." There is an incredible statement of peace for Paul. That statement is, Paul, relax. I'm going to get you to Rome. You're going to be safe there. And I'm not sending you to Rome so you'll be safe. Of course, we know that ultimately it appears Paul is beheaded in Rome. I'm sending you to Rome so the same testimony that you've shared about me here in Jerusalem, you can now share with the people in Rome. So it's got to be a massive encouragement to Paul going, okay, it's crazy here. They're trying to kill me. The Jews are trying to get me, but God hears me, and God has a plan for me, and that plan is to get me to Rome. So therefore, I have some peace. Okay, let's ask our 3 questions. When we read simple passage, Paul trying to defend himself, not giving more than 6, 7 sentences out at the most, maybe even 3 or 4 is a better guess there, okay? Turns into another mob rule. He's in danger. They're like pulling him apart, is how Luke describes it. The tribune rescues him again. The next night, Paul is told by the Lord, "Be at peace. What you've done here to testify for me in Jerusalem, you're going to testify in Rome." Question 1, what does this have to do with God's eternal plan? This kind of 1 and question 3 go together. In God's eternal plan, he takes care of his people. And if God has a plan that he wants to accomplish, man is not going to get in the way. So if God wants Paul in Rome, the Jews are not going to get in the way in the meantime. So God's telling Paul, look, the reason you're going to safely get out of here and get to Rome is because I need you in Rome to testify about me. That's why. And so God's eternal plan is going to be accomplished, and he's going to protect the people that are in that. What do we know about the church? Is that the church is going to spread. Is that God will use persecution. God will use courts. God will use testimony, in this case Paul's testimony, including your testimony, to spread his kingdom, bring others to Christ, and encourage churches. See, that's what the church does, is it uses the Word of God and the testimony of the saints to help others come to Christ and honor God. So you are sitting under the seating of the teaching of God, and you also have a responsibility to share your testimony with others so they can bring encouragement to them and salvation to them. Finally, what do we learn about God's eternal plan in the life of the individual? Is that God has a big picture for his church that's accomplished through individual pictures of individuals. And so God's going to accomplish his church picture through Paul. And because of that, because Paul has heard from God directly, he can relax. And even though it's chaotic around him, Paul can relax, receive the comfort of the Lord, knowing that he has a job to do and God will help him to finish it. So if you feel like God has called you with a job to do and you're thinking it's an impossible task or something's in the way, you keep pursuing that vision, because if it's from God, he will bring about the opportunity for you to accomplish it. Okay, thanks for joining us today for Here Comes the Bride, the Church Begins.